Wilson says he tried to convince the administration to retract the statement, then decided to go public himself with this op-ed article in the New York Times. The White House wasn't pleased.
They had a political agenda that included maintaining support for this war, and they did not want that support to erode by a number of people coming out and saying you were flat wrong, or you lied about this, or you deceived the American people about this.
The White House still maintains there is evidence to suggest Saddam Hussein tried to buy African uranium. But according to Joe Wilson, that's no longer the issue. He says what's important now is what happened after he told Dick Cheney something the vice president didn't want to hear. Joe Wilson didn't know it at the time, but he says that after he began to speak out, a meeting was convened at the White House in the office of the vice president. The subject was him.
This is a bunch of White House political hacks deciding that they're going to run an intelligence operation, find out everything they can about Joe Wilson. And during the course of running that operation, they apparently unearthed my wife's name and her profession.
The next week, Washington Post columnist Bob Novak revealed that profession in print. It's no small point, because Wilson's wife Valerie is a CIA agent.
How beyond the pale is it for someone in the administration to reveal to a journalist like Bob Novak the identity of an undercover CIA?
It's a betrayal of national security. It is essentially the betrayal of our country. It is a treasonous act. It may never be prosecuted as such, but it is an act of betrayal of the country.
Novak will only say he got the information from two senior administration officials. Joe Wilson is convinced the leak was intended as revenge against him and a message to others, and he believes it originated at that meeting in the vice president's office.
The idea was to tell other analysts that if you do to us what Wilson has done to us, we'll do to you what we've just done to Wilson's wife.
The manipulation of U.S. intelligence, the war that followed, and the occupation that now threatens to drag on for years have not only cost thousands of lives, they've also made Iraq a land of opportunity with billions of dollars available to the lucky few. And which American firm has benefited the most? None other than the vice president's old company, Halliburton.
They've overcharged for food and lodging. They've overcharged for gasoline trucking. They've overcharged for vehicles. They've overcharged for all kinds of things. Their behavior has been awful.
Senator Frank Lautenberg says there are two problems: Halliburton's war profiteering and the preferential treatment that may have made it possible.
It's outrageous that the man sitting next to the President of the United States and exerting all the influence that Dick Cheney does, and there's no doubt about the fact that he is a very influential person in the White House, that he still has some contact with Halliburton.
Dick Cheney himself is on the record denying that. Last year he told NBC unequivocally that he had no financial interest in Halliburton of any kind. But wait a minute, that's simply not true. According to the Congressional Research Center here in Washington, Dick Cheney receives deferred compensation from Halliburton, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of it. And he has stock options in the company worth millions of dollars more, the value of which only stands to improve the better Halliburton's business is. Cheney has also insisted he had, quote, no influence, involvement, or knowledge in any way, shape, or form in the awarding of Halliburton's government contracts. But wait another minute. A Defense Department memo recently surfaced revealing that when Halliburton was awarded its $7 billion contract for Iraq without competition, despite his denials, the Vice President's office was indeed briefed on the contract and then specifically approved it. Not surprisingly, there is a lot we would like to ask Dick Cheney. It may be even less surprising that he wasn't available to us on camera. So we asked James Woolsey, a staunch Cheney supporter who espouses many of the same ideals as the Vice President about American power, business, and war. Can you understand how
people in the rest of the world. Listen now to the rationalizations of the war in Iraq. And given what was said before and what's happened there since, look on it as justification of what is still a bad idea.
Sure, a lot of people are predisposed to think bringing democracy and the rule of law to the Middle East is a bad idea because they don't want to be have to make a contribution to it, and because I think they want to put their head in the sand and believe that everything will work out fine.
Or might think that preemptive war without consensus internationally is a bad thing?
It's a traditional view. I think the President's made a good case that in a world of people like Saddam, Khamenei in Iran, Kim Jong-il in North Korea, that waiting for the associations with terrorists and the chemical, bacteriological, nuclear weapons programs to mature is an unsound view.
But Dick Cheney apparently had no trouble tolerating Iraq and Iran just a few years ago, when his companies eagerly profited from them.
How do you square that?
No, Halliburton can speak for itself with respect to the circumstances in which it...
But this is the man who was the CEO of Halliburton and who's now the Vice President of the U.S. And I guess I'm just asking, how do you see that as being something other than self-interest or even hypocrisy?
Well, corporations operate according to the principle of self-interest. That's the way free economies work. And if Halliburton wasn't violating any laws in doing the kind of business in the Middle East that it did, I don't see that it's particularly relevant.
The jury's out on that, apparently, but...
if they violated the law, they violated the law, and they ought to be punished for it. If they didn't, they didn't.
In Texas, a grand jury is now deliberating about whether Halliburton, under Cheney, broke U.S. law by trading with states that sponsor terrorism. In Washington, the Justice Department is investigating whether the Vice President's office broke the law by leaking confidential information about a CIA agent, Joe Wilson's wife. And every day, the bloodbath that is Iraq exposes the bluster and the bunk that Cheney and Bush used to sell an unwise war. But in Dick Cheney's world, it's usually someone else who pays the price. And until Election Day, quite possibly for 4 more years, it's Dick Cheney's world. The rest of us just live here.
And now for everyone here at the Fifth Estate, thank you for watching. I'm Bob McEwen. We'll see you soon.